Hey friends, Jill here, and welcome back to the Market Vibe podcast. I am super excited to have this guest on today. So excited to introduce Tosin Odugbemi. Did I say it correctly?
Yes,
Nope.
you did. No, you did. Odugbemi. Odugbemi.
Odugbemi.
Super close. Yeah.
Love it. And Tosin is a graphic designer, and she's also attending Harvard right now. And she's super talented in the fact that she knows how to build social online presence, personal branding, and is also, to mention, a lovely person. And I'm so happy to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So, just to get us started, for anybody who might not know who you are, can you tell us a little about yourself and sort of the journey that you've been on to get to this point right now?
Yeah, I sure can. Well, like you so beautifully just introduced me. My name is Tosin, and I do attend the Harvard Graduate School of Design. And so that's a really big part of what I do. I study architecture there, but where my passion really lies is in graphic and spatial design. And the way that that takes form in my career is through visual brand strategy. So that's a lot of what I do. That's what I'm building towards doing full time. And yeah, I take on clients and assist them with just kind of telling their story and creating really beautiful visuals that are backed by strategy that's going to help them grow their business, increase their sales, establish their authority in their field, and all of that good stuff.
I love it. That's awesome. And if you guys haven't done so, please go check her out on Instagram. I'll make sure to link her Instagram below because I find it super inspiring. It's definitely different than like a regular influencer. And I think that's what I really like about your page is like it's a great place for me. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I'll go and check out your page if I'm ever feeling creatively blocked because I like that you're always looking at something different. I don't know. I think the perspective that you create when it comes to especially your architecture, you can totally see that in your design, is looking at something that you wouldn't normally see or pay attention to in real life. But yeah, please go check her out on Instagram. You'll be very inspired. so
Oh, thank you.
so let's talk about, okay, so you're going for architecture, but you've been really working a lot in graphic design and branding. How did you get to go from architecture to branding? Like, how did that happen?
Oh man, well, it's still that story is still unraveling, and it's been pretty recent, like in the last few years, that I've kind of shifted gears because I've always, since I was little, been a creative person. And so I think that I was destined to go into some type of creative art. And, that bled into everything I did from when I was little, from, dance to like fine arts to music and all of these things. And so I mean, it's a very long story, but I had a lot of cultural and identity problems when I was growing up. And I grappled with a lot of those things. And so I think I just really sank into design. And that was kind of my salvation during those times. And so I ended up kind of telling my parents, and they would encourage me to do creative things. But at the same time, because my parents are immigrants and they're both doctors, and I come from a family of these really pragmatic personalities, they wanted me to do something that was not only creative, but also was a very well established career or profession. And so the intersection of those two things, that creativity and that pragmatism, was architecture. So since I was about 10 years old, I've always just thought, okay, well, I'm going to become an architect because that's something that's going to allow me to be creative. But, there's a kind of promise there of like, if you study hard and get this degree, you're going to make this amount of money and you're going to have this success and all of these things. And so it was just the career that I kind of blindly went for. But right before we started recording on this call, I was telling you that like I really relate to you and Michael's experience going through college, where you come out of it and you're like, well, now I'm in debt and I'm not really sure like if this was necessary for what I wanted to go for. And although I'm in my master's now, and so I didn't have that kind of moment after my college or my undergraduate degree. I was just like, completely focused on this goal of being an architect. There was moments in time where I started to falter over the last year or two. And so what ended up happening, because I was fully fledged, like going to be an architect, I was doing these internships, I was doing everything I could, I was applying to these awesome grad schools that I was so blessed to get into. And then COVID came. And
Mm.
what ended up happening is I lost my internship. I lost like my summer job. I had this whole plan, my year between undergraduate and um, master's degree. I had this whole plan to do an internship and also to work part-time at a restaurant to just like help me save a little bit more. And obviously I, got laid off from my restaurant job, like lost the internship opportunity. And so I was like, okay, I moved back home with my parents. I was living in Vancouver at that time. And I was like, okay, like, what am I going to do? Like, I guess I could sit at home and pick up these, like, for us, it was called CERB. I think in the US, they called it stimulus checks. I think is what you guys called
Mm.
it.
Mhm.
But it's like I could just sit and collect these checks, or maybe I can like see if I can figure out another way to make money and save. And so I ended up leaning into something that I had just been doing like completely offhanded on the side, just like, once in a while would make like logos for people and charge them like $200, which I thought was like so much money to be charging for a logo design. Because I had those hard skills that I learned in school of like the Adobe Creative Suite and some of the technical knowledge that you need to create these types of designs. And I always had a decent eye and a creative eye, like I mentioned from when I was little. And so what ended up happening is I just kind of was like, okay, maybe I can design more logos and things for people. And so I had started to, advertise those services on social media. I made like a website off of a website builder, and just whipped it together really quickly and was like, okay, like if anyone needs a logo, here I am. And, people started coming and a lot of people started to hire me for that. And it just got more and more serious over like a month. And then what kind of accelerated, I think, the whole process is that the murder of George Floyd happened. And so then there was this moment, this cultural moment where people were really empowering Black businesses and really giving voice to Black influencers and content creators and things like that. And so I started to get these shout outs. And before this, it's not that I had 2 Instagram followers. I already had like 8,000 or something like that. So it wasn't a teeny tiny account, but there was like a big like injection of people and traffic over to my account because all of these different bigger accounts and smaller accounts alike were starting to recognize and shout me out and push people towards me. And then all these people are asking like, do you have a business or something we can promote? And I was like, well, I'm making these logos. And so then I just got like all of this attention on me. And I was like, okay, this is a moment in culture. And I know that this is not going to last forever. So I may as well take full advantage of this and like roll with that momentum and see how far it can push me now that I'm given this opportunity. And so that's really all it was. It just kind of like almost fell into my lap. And since then, I've really started to build this business that I never even thought that I was like, I never knew that this is what I wanted. I never was going for entrepreneur, but the more I did it, the more I fell in love with it and the more I fell out of love with architecture. And it's been unraveling over the past few years where I'm just like, I don't think I want to be an architect anymore. And I've done a few more, like I've done another internship since then, and it just did not bring me anywhere near as much joy as it brought me to like sit and really dig into my business and serve people in that way and, create something in that way that I know is more for myself than it is for some other bigger corporation that I'm working under. And yeah, so I mean, long story long, that's how I switched from architecture to branding.
Wow. So, okay, you mentioned a lot of things that I definitely want to touch on. So, I think the first thing that's really interesting is, and it's crazy because I literally just read this in this book I'm reading. It's called Worry or Wonder Over Worry by Amber Ray.
Mm.
And she talked about listening to that voice when it tells you to go somewhere. And it can be so easy for us to be like, well, I have this plan. And this plan is, I've been literally like you, I've been planning this my whole life. I know what I'm doing, but you took that opportunity to step out on faith and do something different. What was it like to take that first step?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely scary. And I think that I had that almost privilege of doing this in a time where everything was uncertain. So this was just
Mhm.
another uncertain thing. It wasn't that I definitely credit people who I hear their stories that they were in a very secure position and then took that leap of faith. I was already, kind of in this position where I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. And so it became a little bit easier on me. So it's like, okay, let me try this. Like, I don't have much to lose here. I'm living at home with my parents. I'm not paying rent or anything. So I might as well just like try something new out. And so, um, but I completely agree that it's like sometimes we get really stuck in our ways. And I definitely do that as well, where it's like I have a plan and I want to execute it. And that's my personality type for sure. I'm like very type A. I'm an Enneagram 3. I plan things and then I execute it. And learning to let go has been like one of my greatest gifts, I think, in life. And learning to be, I always say that I'm spontaneous, but with discernment. And so I'm
Mm.
not reckless. I won't just go ahead and like do anything regardless of the consequences, but I try to allow myself to, make decisions quickly and allow myself to try things and move with curiosity and, just like try things out and experiment because I have that privilege. I'm young. Even if I wasn't young, like life is just too short, to make a plan and then be completely unwavering in it, regardless of what else life is throwing at you.
Yeah, because even if you ignore that, I mean, you could always say, like, what if? Like, you'll always, like, if
Mm,
that were to happen to me, I would always be questioning what if. And I think that in life, you're either pushed or I love this saying. It's God either hits you with a metaphor or a two by four. And it's always stuck with me. And anytime
mm,
something drastic has happened in my life, I'm like, I look back and I'm like, that was my push. Like I had to go that way. So I think it's just really about like understanding that having a plan is great. You should plan for whatever happens. You should plan for your life, figuring out what it is that you want to do. But if something opens up to you that you didn't expect, I mean, walk through it. I think that's
mm,
what it boils down to in your situation is like you saw this opportunity and you're like, I cannot not ignore this. I have to go with it. And I think that's
mm.
really special that because of George Floyd's murder, like so many other, like there was so much attention brought to the Black community and it was like about freaking time. Unfortunately, it had to be something so tragic, but how amazing that he left like his name left a legacy so for so many Black creators, for business owners, for people of influence. So it's amazing that during this time you had this opportunity to really be like, yeah, like it's our time to shine. Like what did that feel like in that moment?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it felt intense. I just wanted to say quickly that something you said about making plans, but then also being loose within them, it just reminded me of like this mantra that one of my best friends always says to me, where she's like, hold it loosely, Tosin. And like, I just want to mention that, where it's such a surreal thing. And it's so important to remember that, whether that be in career or relationship or anything, where it's like, plan for these things and obviously like be proactive in life and, protect the things that you care about. However, hold everything loosely so that exactly if that it's
Mhm.
like, if God has something better out there for you, you want to be open to that rather than, just like holding on to things so tightly with like white knuckle fists and just,
Yeah,
not allowing great things to come into your life. But sorry, to answer to answer the
you're
actual
good.
question that you asked me, about, sorry, how did it feel to kind of experience that moment, like of attention? Is that what your question was?
Yeah, well, and it's just like it was a cultural moment that like I'm sure like if you are a person of color, you felt like and part of the Black community, you felt that. So what did that whole moment mean to you?
Yeah, yeah, it was bittersweet for sure because while, there was all of these negative emotions flooding around and it was honestly a hard time to be, I wouldn't even say on social media, but just like be present in the world as a person of
Hmm.
color and as a Black woman in particular. It was just so intense. And these things, I guess I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for every Black person out there, but I also know that like I've talked to other Black people who relate. So it's probably not an uncommon experience. But in that moment, it was like, okay, none of this is new to us. Like for most
Yes.
of us knew that all of this was happening. Most of us were living with this discomfort before, but now the whole world knows, which I was immensely grateful for. And it's like the whole world has almost woken up to this and is now addressing it, which is a great, great thing. But it's really heavy when when there's always this reminder because like
Mm.
there's always those underlying currents of just like being Black in a predominantly, actually it's not even a predominantly white society, but just like a white favoring society.
Mm.
And there's always like those things, there's always those microaggressions and just like little reminders throughout the day, or maybe, like the week, that is just like, oh, these spaces were not created for you. But then the way to kind of cope with it for me is that like I come off it, I'm just like, okay, like there's nothing I can do about this. And therefore I'm not going to focus on it, like focus on what I can change. Right. And so when this moment was happening, and it was not just George Floyd, like, of course, that was a really big catalyst of it, but there was like boom, 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 boom. Like it was a lot
Mhm.
of people who were being murdered at once, and a lot of events that were taking place that was like, this is a problem, guys. Like, why aren't we talking about it? And I think that there's, like, I swear there's like divine orchestration in that and how everything unfolded, because like this needed to be brought to the light. But when all that happened and everybody was talking about it so much, it was hard to forget, right? Like it's hard to just be like living in this la la land, which like I love to live in sometimes, where it's like, nope, like nobody's racist, I'm good.
Yeah.
It's like impossible to when, every time you log onto Instagram, there's videos of horrible things happening, or people, creating graphics showing their support, and like this like collective outrage, which again, I don't want to act as though I'm not grateful for these things. It's just boom, reminder. Or then, like, I mean, COVID was going on, so I wasn't really leaving the house. But when I did, then, there's billboards that say Black Lives Matter out. And it's just like a reminder again. Or then there's white people on the streets who are giving you a knowing nod, like saying like, I am with you. And it's like, it's all coming out of like a really
It's a
well-intentioned
lot. You're
place.
like, this is a
But
lot.
it was just a lot. Yeah, exactly. And so that, I feel like it was just heavy, and it was just like every single day it's like this weight. And then at the same time, there was a lot of great things happening as well, where it's like I would open my Instagram feed and like refresh, and it's like, just tons of new shares and comments and people joining my community through follows, and all of these like kind DMs, and like, you've been published on this news article. So that was obviously something to be celebrated, but it was just bittersweet. That's the perfect word,
Mm,
I think, to
yeah,
describe it.
I guess so. One thing that I want to talk to you about, I really want to talk to you about like the creative process. I love talking about, where does inspiration come from? What happens when you have blocks? But I really want to talk to you just about like where your inspiration comes from, because like I was saying earlier, your designs and the things that you feature are so innovative, because I feel like it's a certain piece of architecture or art that you wouldn't normally focus on, and it's
Mm.
something different. So where do you think your inspiration comes from, or your creative eye? Like what inspires you when you see something that, yeah, that's a very broad question, but
No, I love that question, and it's actually a question that I get often. I think it's really great to ask creatives like, where do you get inspired, because that can obviously cause inspiration for yourself. But I I really see there's no like one place where I'm like, I do yoga in the morning or anything like that that causes inspiration. But I think that I just have a tendency to get like, just enthralled by the mundane. And I like to romanticize things. I think that that's just part of my personality. I like beautiful things, and I made a career out of it. Is all that I did. And so I think that it's just like out of a desire to romanticize my life and make the world a little bit more of a beautiful place than it already is. The only way to really do that, because we're surrounded by things that seem boring and sometimes tragic all the time, is by like getting creative and looking for it. And so even just through Instagram, like through Instagram stories and stuff, like I don't think that my life looks special or spectacular as I live it, but it's just displayed in such a way because I'm going to notice that like little tiny ray of sun that's like catching some material just in the right way. And I'm going to take a picture of that, while a lot of people might just pass it by and completely not notice it. Or if they do, they're just like, awesome. And then they just let that moment be fleeting. So I think that I really like, I always think about like finding the magic in the mundane, romanticizing things, and that's inspirational to me. So then every single thing I do on the day to day, it becomes a source of inspiration, because I'm just observing, and again, like kind of moving through life through like, I guess looking through, moving through life with curiosity, I guess would be the best way to say that. And like, yeah, just noticing things and photographing them and archiving them for myself or sharing them on social media. And then that's where I start to find inspiration. And then because I'm a visual person, I like sort things. And this is just the way my brain works. I feel like I sort things into like shapes and colors and contrasts and things like that. And so it really starts to dilute itself, which probably makes sense why I naturally went from architecture and spatial design and then almost like went back down to the graphic. And now I go like, I really flip back and forth between the two, especially in academia, where it's like, how can like graphics become space and space become
Mhm.
graphics? And then obviously that's a different way of working that results in newer and more innovative results. But yeah, just kind of like finding the mundane, almost like diluting things and simplifying them down. And I'll notice it's like the way that like the shapes are, if I like look up and there's buildings around me and stuff, it's just really interesting. So I'll take a picture of that moment, and it's different than how other people typically photograph certain things. So yeah, that's where I find my inspiration.
Yeah, I think, you know what I think is interesting about creativity? I think one, it has to be something that you kind of cultivate on your own. You figure out your own
Mhm.
style of what inspires you. You figure out your triggers that, like, really, for me, like, it has to be like something emotional. It has to be something that I'm
Mm,
just like, oh my gosh. So like for me, like I'm a big theater nerd. I danced for 10 years and
mm,
I am obsessed with the Bridgerton musical, the unofficial Bridgerton musical, because I saw the creative process. And Michael is probably so tired of me talking his ear off about this musical. But I saw the creative process, and like when you can see, I think when you can see somebody's like creative process, when you see like an idea and then you see it explode, and then they took you along their journey of writing the songs live, and then to
mm,
see the finished product. So now every time I listen to that, it really helps me, especially when I'm in like a blocked place. And I went through a block back in August. We had just come back from this really inspiring trip. It was like a dream trip. And we spoke on stage for the first time, and we were going to be
mm,
working with Google on a challenge. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then we came back and it was like a thump. And
mm,
it felt so, and I didn't know how to get out of it. And then when that album came out right around that time, is about 3 weeks, and it really helped me kind of get back into that inspiring place. But I think what's important that you pointed out is figuring out like what are the small things that you can look at in your everyday life that inspires you. I think people think that
mm,
inspiration has to be this like big magical moment, but it can be something so small. And like for me, we took like a trip to LA in April after we had been in isolation for over a year. And that was probably the most inspiring trip I have ever been on, because I am so inspired by like the California just vibe and palm trees and all of it. I was just like snapping pictures of everything. So I think it's just figuring out what are those things that inspire you and invoke some sort of emotion. But yeah, you can find them in your everyday. Like it could be like literally your little jewelry box, or it can be the way
mm.
that you pour your coffee. I think it's just cultivating that and then figuring out your triggers. And I don't know about you, but for me, I get my best ideas in the shower. I don't know why, but it is always in the shower. And I always have to yell at Michael. I'm like, I have an idea. Can you write this down for me?
Yeah. Oh man. No, I love that all so much. And yeah, music is such a big source of inspiration for me as well. But something that I wanted to kind of point out that you said, first of all, I do see your affinity for California in your
Yep.
branding.
Yep. I'm
It's
obsessed.
completely making sense right now. Everything's clicking together. But that's the thing. It's like when we travel, and that's something I always encourage people to do. It's like be a tourist in your own city, because when we travel, we're feeling so inspired. We're taking photos of everything. We're noticing everything because we're in a new space, and our brains just love to be in a new space. You know, like we feel like, okay, everything's fresh. Like, therefore, we should observe and take this all in. However, there's times for sure where it's like we just kind of get used to our own cities. And I know that I feel like I made a mistake when I lived in Vancouver, where I automatically just shifted into this mode of like I live here, and therefore I never was a tourist in that city. Until
Mm.
date, there's so many things that I never did there that it's like, you know, tourists do this, and like I still haven't even been to like Tofino, you know, or just like all these little tiny things. And so I know that when I moved to Boston, that was one of the first things I did. I was like, I'm not just going to be here and then just automatically have that mindset that it's like I live here. I want to explore the city and notice things about it and never fall out of love with it, never stop being enthralled by it, or like never allow the beauty of the city to stop evoking emotions. And I think that that's something that we can all take in. And if we would kind of just get into that mindset, because there's something special about traveling for sure. And I love to do it as well. And it is inspirational. But like you said, we often fall into this trap of thinking that like inspiration has to be this big moment or this big thing. But of course, like I always say that like life is what happens in between the milestones. Like 99% of our life is made up of mundane moments. And then like 1%
Mm,
is like, I just got proposed to, or I just had this baby, or the biggest inspiration of my life like just happened, or I'm on this trip. Like that's actually like such a small bit of our lives. And so if we just drudge our way through all of the mundane, waiting for those big moments where we can be inspired or even just like feel joy, then obviously it's not going to make life very enjoyable and we're hardly going to be inspired. So that's why I try to find magic in the mundane and I try to romanticize things just so I can stay in like a sustainable and constant state of inspiration rather than riding out the extreme highs and then crashing extreme lows. But I don't do
mm.
it perfectly. I definitely feel those highs and lows for sure, but I try. I'm aiming for that happy middle.
I love that magic in the mundane. That is so good. That well, and like you said, it just keeps you in that state of creativity and that state of inspiration. And I love that you talked about curiosity because we had some mentors of ours early on in business when we were kind of learning about sales and how to talk to people, just how to talk to people in general. You just approach it with a childlike curiosity, especially if you're wanting to get to know someone, like be curious about them. And you can say the exact same thing about being curious about your life, about your surroundings, about the people around you. I think that, I hate that saying curiosity killed the cat, but I feel like honestly curiosity can lead you to something that you wouldn't have expected. It's a way to learn. So yeah, I'm right there
Yeah.
with you. One thing I wanted to circle back on was you kind of talked about like, you're going to Harvard. It's a very prestigious school. Like I'm sure when people say that, they're like extremely impressed. I mean, I was impressed. I'm like, dang girl. But you talked about you're kind of like, because I know you heard our story where we went to school, we came out, we graduated in 2011, zero jobs. It was like it was very
Mm,
difficult. It was not what they painted the picture as, like, going to high school. And even though you've pivoted, and I even say this too, I am so grateful for my college years because I feel like college is so much different than high school and any kind of younger learning of school because it's so structured. And I feel like college really for me was my time to really become the person I wanted to be. I was in a brand new town. Nobody knew me. I could actually feel safe to be who I was. And it also like cracked me open because like I honestly grew up in a very small town up in Northern California that was predominantly white. And then I got to go to this new school where it was super diverse and I got to learn more about the world, the honesty of what the world was like. So I'm always so grateful for my college years because it really gave me my chance to like expand my mind further than I had ever been, pushed. So that's how I kind of feel like about the college years. What would you say if somebody's like, oh, why did I go to school? Or if they're thinking about going to school, kind of like where you're at right now?
yeah, I mean, I am totally in this position of talking to a lot of my friends as well about, going to school. And although Harvard is a very prestigious school, and I'm so honored to get to go here. And I'm like in awe every single day as I walk around campus. I'm like, who let me let me in here? Like, I feel like everyone's just so impressive and everything's so wonderful. But however, at the same time, I'm very critical of academia in general and the academy and just the exactly what you're talking about. This story that it seems like we've all been told, like I don't know who whispered this into all of our ears at birth, that it's like if you go to school and you study hard and you get good grades and then you go to more school after you're done the original 12 years that we're all kind of forced to do to some extent, and then you will get a good job and everything will be okay. And like that's just not true. That is a path for some people. And like you've mentioned, like Michael was mentioning in your first episode, like of course, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an architect or something that it's like this requires a professional degree, then there's not much wiggle room there. You're probably going to need to go to school, but at least you know that what you're doing is perpetuating you towards your goals. But a lot of people, I think, including myself, it's tricky because we're expected to make these grand life decisions when we're around 16, 17 years old. The way that my birthday is set up, I graduated high school when I was 17. I applied to
Mhm.
university when I was 16. Like I was a baby. I still am a baby.
Yeah.
And I was making these like life altering decisions. And I'm so blessed that I didn't go into debt for my undergrad at all. But for my master's, I certainly am. And so with that, like with just like knowing that and knowing that there's so many people who paid their way through their undergrad degree and made that decision at age 16, like that's so crazy that we're kind of like expected to do that. And so I would just say to anybody who's kind of wondering the same thing as I say to all my friends who are like, should I go back to school? I'm just like, school is awesome. Like academia is awesome. And it's a really great tool and a vehicle. And obviously, like you said, there's so much that you learn, not only about whatever subject matter that you're studying, but just about the world. There's discipline that you learn. There's like a certain culture of being a student that's like an invaluable experience. And you might meet amazing people. You might meet the love of your life in
Mhm.
college, or you might meet somebody who completely changes your career, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it might be a really great opportunity to go visit a new city. However, like when making that decision, it's like you should also weigh it against other things. It's like if I was to spend whatever, $100,000 you're about to spend on college on like online courses, or if I was about to put in however many like 10,000 hours it's going to take you to get that degree into like, building a business or something like that. Like, it's just like knowing that there's like, I think that we should all just have this awareness that there's other routes, like there's other means to get to your destination, and heavily consider those other means as well, so that you're not just like blindly following in line with this whole like toe of people who are just going to school trying to get the job and like going into debt over it. So like you said,
Mhm.
critical of academia, but also see the value in it.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I am so with you. And I think you should be questioning everything, really question everything and see if that's the
Mm,
way that, the route that you want to go. Are you okay with taking out student loans? And that might be something that might be hard to grasp when you're that young. But I
mm,
mean, I think that with like my generation, with like more millennials becoming parents, like we're aware now. We're like, okay, so when our kids are that age, we can be like, hey, you can go to college and you can do this, or you can pursue this route. Like there are 100% other routes. I heard Dean
mm,
Graziosi talk at a conference saying that he was encouraging his daughter to, because she wanted to be an interior designer, she would stay home for 2 years after high school and just do
mm.
an internship for 2 years unpaid with
Yes.
someone. And then when she was ready, start her own thing. And I
Mm,
was like, that is so smart. I think that kids just
mm,
need the option of both. And I think the problem with our gen is we didn't know that there was an option. And it was just our
yeah.
parents and our elders being like, oh, well, you don't want to end up like us. You need to go to college for
Mm,
that.
yeah.
So, for me, it's like I've gone through those feelings and like I understand I had to do that because that was just the way that my life went. But now knowing, yeah, like you said, question everything, be critical of any kind of academia, and just know that you have options. You don't have to go with
Yeah.
the only option.
Yes. Yes. Totally agree.
So, okay, last question, and I love asking this question to certainly someone who's a creative as well. So I know that you have just such a deep love of branding design and just creativity in general. What is the impact that you would like to have on this community, this like branding and design community? And what do you think your lasting message you would want to have?
Well, my whole goal in life is to make the world a little bit more beautiful. And so I would say in my community as well, that would just be the goal, like to inspire people to live beautifully, to live, productively, but also restfully, and, to just like find those moments, find those pockets of joy and peace in there every single day. And yeah, to just like create things that are delightful. That's what I'm just trying to do and share and inspire others to do, and equip them with the like hard skills and tools that they need to do that as well.
Oh, I love that. Well, I love you, Tosin. I am so happy that we got a chance to actually meet face to face, sort of.
Me too. Yes. Yes. It's so good to see you speaking and not just like a still image and then the voice. It's, it's so special.
Yeah,
And thank you so much for
exactly.
having me.
Of
You're such a light.
course. So if people want to learn more about you or they want to come connect with you, where can they find you?
Well, my username on everything is just my first and last name at Tosin Odugbemi. I won't bore you with spelling it.
I'll
I'm
put
sure
it
that
in
it will be
everything
like
below so they can just click and go.
awesome. Thank you so much. And then, or if you're wanting to kind of go to one place, you could go to my website, which is www.oluwatosin, OLUWATOSIN.net. And then everything kind of links out of there. And there I share a lot of value on visual branding and, also show them my work and everything like that. So one stop shop for everything Tosin.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tosin, for your time. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.